Don't you just love it when someone who's not in a relationship gives relationship advice? Me too. This video was requested by one of our patrons, so thank you to Suzanne for requesting it and for paying us. Caveats and disclaimers. Okay, so I haven't talked about relationships between the types on this channel yet, because I have some slight reservations about it. If you asked me whether typology was useful in team building, in a workplace or a company, I would say definitely. So why would I advocate using it for team building and work in relationships, yet not for romantic relationships? Work in relationships in a business, a company or a startup have goals and measurable metrics for success. Whereas with romantic relationships, it's much more vague and fluid. You could say that happiness is simply the aim, but you could also argue that's more the responsibility of the individual and not the relationship. So my first general statement on relationships would be that having goals is important. I think relationships should have direction. They should be layered and able to offer many benefits. There need to be instances where the relationship is greater than the sum of its parts, like the Beatles. Also, of course, people of any type can have a successful or terrible relationship. Okay, so INFP and INTJ relationships. My initial reaction is that this is quite a good pairing. Mutual muses. INTJs are goal-orientated and have a contentious relationship with hanging out, having fun, and chilling. They are purposeful people who want to be productive, creative, or increasingly competent in their areas of interest. INFPs are often explorative, imaginative, and emotionally engaged. They want to experience new things and find out how they feel about them. They build up this kind of framework of values over their life and are deeply attached to finding their authentic selves. Since they're both introverts, they're going to give each other a lot of space and will rarely impose upon each other. But more than that, when they do spend time together, they're going to want it to be meaningful and worthwhile. One issue that INTJs can have is that they can become too narrow in their focus, and this creates a brilliant opportunity for INFPs to step in. No other type is as unusual, eclectic, or downright eccentric in their interests. This can have a muse-like effect, where they bring different ways of looking at the world to the INTJ, which can snap them out of any rut they might find themselves in. My advice to INTJs is to let the INFP open up and talk at length, which is something they don't often do or don't often have the chance to do. I've seen INTJs focus intensely and get a great deal done. Then they'll hit a roadblock, which is inevitable for anyone. Often the way they try to solve it is with sheer force of will and determination, just trying to smash through the roadblock. When they're in this headspace, the last thing they want to do is leave the project they're working on and do something else. They're hell-bent on getting it done. But what you often find in any creative pursuit, where you're coming up against a wall, when you take your mind to a different place, you often see that there's a way around the wall, instead of being up close to it and smashing your head up against it over and over. INFPs can be excellent sources of inspiration in these moments. Let them let you into their world. Just spend a bit of time there. Let your mind just slowly unravel whatever knots have been tied there. I can almost guarantee that when you return to whatever project you were working on, you'll both feel refreshed, but more importantly, be able to solve those problems or see a way around them. Essentially, it's the function of extroverted intuition from the INFP feeding the introverted intuition of the INTJ. NE likes to bring in new ideas and perspectives, and NI likes to pick which ones are most useful to narrow down on. One reason that NE types and NI types have this kind of synergy is that, in this case, the INFP is taking the INTJ into areas that they would never naturally go. And even if that area is not in any way related to what the INTJ is doing, because they have NI, they can take what they're seeing, see the principles underneath it, and then apply it back to what they were working on. In a nutshell, taking inspiration from it. Okay, so how do INTJs help INFPs? The thinking types in general, but specifically the NT types, struggle with emotional support. The way they show the most tangible support for their partners is by solving problems for them. In the case of the INTJ, it's giving their partner useful systems to work with in their life. This is because INTJs love to solve future upcoming problems, or problems they think are likely to reoccur in a person's life. My INTJ friend once took me over to my laptop and changed the settings on my laptop so that when I moved the mouse, one motion with my fingers would move the cursor a greater distance. His argument being that it would make my workflow more efficient, because I would save that fraction of a second moving from one place to another. Honestly, he was actually right. It is much easier now. So firstly, INTJs are weird. Secondly, getting to share their insights and their clever systems with you, for them, comes from a place of genuine affection. I know that's probably stretching the definition of the word affection quite a lot, but I think that most of the NT types would agree with the sentiment that helping someone is often giving them what they need and not what they want, always. Seeing a logical way to stop a reoccurring problem in someone's life, and this can include emotional problems and relationship problems, then having the person adopt the solution. That's a very satisfying thing for an INTJ. There's that mutual respect that gets built up with those kinds of interactions. The INTJ shows respect by spending time trying to help you solve your problems, and you show respect in return by being the kind of person that actually wants to solve their life problems. INFPs are not always great at structuring their lives in efficient ways, but they do value this in other people. And INTJs, of course, have that skill in abundance. So as an INFP, letting the INTJ give you these clever systems is always a good move. Just generally in relationships, allowing your partner to give something to you can kind of be your gift to them. Communication styles. Personality types can be useful because they correlate with communication styles. When you have an argument with someone, there's the central issue that you're actually arguing about. Then there are all of these secondary issues that come from the way you choose to argue with a person. I have found that often those secondary issues can cause bigger problems than the thing you started arguing about in the first place. And generally, this centers around clashing communication styles. INTJs are not just blunt, but they can be confidently and unapologetically blunt, which is kind of worse. So my advice to INFPs is to take what they say seriously, but not always personally, because more often than not, it's coming from a place of detached and impersonal analysis. INTJs filter things through the lens of, does this make sense? Whereas INFPs filter through the lens of, how do I feel about this? And this can cause an understandable clash. So clearly this is a topic that has much more potential content than I first thought. Let me add some extra things. Planning versus spontaneity. INTJs like to plan. Although they're not as rigid and structured as they're sometimes made out to be, nonetheless, they like to feel settled on things. They like to make decisions. They like to be prepared. If they start to go too far into lacking structure, it can be very stressful. I would really not describe them as spontaneous. Being spontaneous is something you can learn to be, but it just doesn't come natural to them. INFPs, on the other hand, I've described in the past as wanderers. As the name suggests, they're people that value their flexibility, their freedom, the ability to move at their own pace, and in whatever direction they choose to in the moment. It's not a coincidence that the fictional archetype of an INTJ is the evil mastermind pulling the strings, and the INFP is the hero that somehow gets swept up into some big adventure without intending to. Now, I could advise that INTJs up their levels of spontaneity and adventurousness, or that INFPs try to float around like a cloud less. But I have unconventional views on relationships, and I really don't think people need to spend as much time together as they often do in relationships. I must say that does solve quite a lot of problems. In this particular case, I would say, from the INTJ's perspective, wrapping the INFP up in structure and obligation is going to feel very claustrophobic and suffocating very quickly. So try to minimize that stuff. And for the INFP, if you do agree to a plan with an INTJ, try not to be flaky. These two types can be a real powerhouse pairing. They have the same type of feeling function, which makes them both highly individualistic. They both know what they value, what they stand for. So it's a relationship that can have a lot of integrity, especially if those values align. There's a really nice complementarity and synergy that comes from the innovation and the inspiration the INFP can bring, and the INTJ's ability to take those things, systematize them, and build them into something. They both value imagination and creativity, so they'll never look at the other person's projects or interests or hobbies or passions as being silly or a waste of time. They are both supportive in their own different ways and want to satisfy their curiosities. I'll put my ego aside here for a second and say that often on these videos, the comment section is as informative or more so than the videos. So for the sake of discussion and for the benefit of Suzanne who requested this video, please leave your insights or experiences of INFP-INTJ relationships in the comments. If you yourself want to request a video, you can do that through our website or our Patreon, both of which are linked below. Also, if you're an INTJ or an INFP or any other type, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you can stand to get notifications.